The Cannabis Heals Me podcast, episode 91.
You're listening to the Cannabis Heals Me podcast, where we explore the real stories of real people who have discovered the profound healing properties of the cannabis plant in their own lives. Find more at cannabishealsme.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Cannabis Heals Me podcast. This is your host, Rachel Kennerly, and we're coming to you once again from the Storybook Inn Studios. So glad you guys have come back to join me today. If you're joining me for the first time, I really appreciate you tuning in. I hope you'll enjoy the show. I hope you will share it with someone else if you enjoy it. We try to put out some good quality content, get some great stories on here so that our listeners can in turn go and share that with other people and hopefully inform them that cannabis does have medicinal benefits. If you are new to the show, then you have probably not heard about our Tell 3 People Challenge. Each week, we ask our listeners to tell 3 people about the podcast. What we want to do is share these stories far and wide, and again, get out the information that there are medicinal benefits to cannabis. The government has lied to everyone in this nation for 80 years, so we've got a lot of misinformation to overcome, and if you could help us kind of correct some of that misinformation by spreading the message of this show, we would really appreciate it. We also appreciate all of our listeners that have gone out and given us a rating or review on their podcast app. I've noticed that a few more reviews have come in, or a few more ratings have come in, and we really appreciate that. And the reason I ask you guys to do this every week, and I know you're tired of me explaining this to you as well, but assuming that you are a new listener, this will be the first time to you, so it'll be new and not quite as irritating. We ask our listeners to give us a rating or review on your podcast app because that helps boost us in the algorithm, and the podcast app will actually recommend the show to other people who are listening to similar type content. It's a free way for us to get word out about the podcast. While you're out there giving us a rating or review, make sure you subscribe to the podcast so that each time a new episode comes out, it'll automatically download to your podcast catcher and you don't have to worry about missing us. It'll automatically be out there just waiting for you, like your faithful dog or your faithful cat or whatever pet it is you have at home that waits for you when you get home. Our guest today is Elizabeth Futch. Elizabeth is actually a medical refugee from the state of Texas, which is really embarrassing for me to have to say that people have to leave my home state of Texas in order to travel and get access to medicine that works for their medical condition. And like a lot of the people that we've spoken to on this show, Elizabeth was prescribed a whole ton of different types of medications, and none of them worked nearly as well as plant medicine. So without further delay, let's welcome Elizabeth to the show. Elizabeth, thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We had met on Facebook through a group called, Texans for Medical Cannabis?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Now
Through Bobby.
Okay. Did you start that group or did Bobby?
Bobby started that group. He lost his father to cancer, and it's very, touchy for him.
Yeah.
He's passionate about it now.
Bobby and I know each other because our kids went to school together. So I was shocked when I started talking about cannabis on Facebook, and it was a Christian school, mind you. I was shocked when I started talking about cannabis on Facebook that he was actually a proponent for it. I've been very surprised by the lack of pushback that I've gotten. And then some of the allies that I've found have been very shocking to me.
I bet it has. Keith, it's amazing at the folks who are affected once they realize the benefits of cannabis. And other natural medicines, naturally, but we are focusing on cannabis today. And much relief has been found throughout many. I've been doing this, helping folks, talking to folks, teaching them about cannabis since 2011. We went to California to a farm and started learning then. And it's just been a process of learning.
Mm-hmm. Now, you're actually a medical refugee from Texas, right?
Yes, ma'am. I had to leave. In Texas, cannabis is not legal for anybody. There's a few who are on a bit of a medical program that we have. But with fibromyalgia, PTSD, IBS, autoimmune disorders, they're not covered under the Texas law. When I left Texas, Lufkin, there's probably video of me at Walmart and Sam's looking for a buggy and riding around shopping in the buggies because the pain and all from the fibromyalgia just made it impossible to do a full grocery shop and then make it home and put the groceries up. And now that I'm here in Colorado, I started off with RSO and have stepped down now to a maintenance dose with infused coconut oil. And when I first came here, I could hardly walk at all, and I was in excruciating pain. Now I'm hiking these trails, the Inman Trail, and all these trails in these mountains and on these roads and creeks, pain-free just about it. An occasional flare when a storm comes through, but nothing like what it was in Texas. I have friends who have some of the same disorders, who it's totally ruined their lives, either from the prescription drugs that they have to take, gabapentin or gamma, however you pronounce that word. I've got a cousin who gained so much weight on it that it put pressure on her joints and her heart, So, and when I told her about cannabis and how well I'm doing, her and her husband both now are thinking about coming down here for a extended vacation to see if she can get the relief. I've brought several people to Colorado and helped them find relief through cannabis. Some have moved here and some have gone back to Texas and have gone back to their old ways and are not in good shape anymore.
Well, give us a little bit of your history. I guess being in East Texas, cannabis may not have been your first choice for pain relief.
No, ma'am. Through several trials and errors, we know what Tylenol and all of those do. It was causing a lot of liver problems. When you step up and go to the painkillers, the hydrocodone and those, totally had a bad reaction. I have a bad reaction. What's the one? Morphine. My leg was broken. Compound break.
Oh, wow.
What it was called. Yeah, and the morphine made me literally crazy and angry and so agitated that the doctor just left the room and told him to put me out because the more I was having such a bad reaction to the morphine.
Wow.
Yeah, and so it was a lot of pain and stuff. There were several times that I had the thought of, I wondered if it would be better to go to heaven with my father and grandmother than to continue to stay on this earth. And that was scary enough to my husband that he made the choice to bring our business to Colorado Springs.
Wow. When were you first diagnosed with fibromyalgia?
The diagnosis was year before last in Houston. The fibro and RA showed up in blood tests after a couple of tests, other tests, and the blood test showed up. And it was, I had been trying to deal with the doctors and the, labs, and it just was getting so expensive that we just couldn't afford it. And once we got the diagnosis, and I had already been here 3 or 4 years ago doing some research for another lady and had found some articles where cannabis was helping fibromyalgia. So we started experimenting. And it has come from total pain and crying most of the time to I'm walking, talking, functioning, marketing for my husband's business again.
Wow. When did you start, because just because you were diagnosed doesn't mean that your symptoms weren't going far back. When did you first start experiencing symptoms from fibromyalgia and rheumatoid arthritis?
I have suffered many symptoms that I thought were bangs and bruises for growing up for many years now, about 15. And have found out since then, since the diagnosis and through much research, that a lot of the things that I thought was just normal, everyday bumps and bruises and pains were probably signs of fibromyalgia starting approximately 15 years ago. And then I had took a job on a pipeline, and the thyroid went totally crazy and went whack, and it made everything progress. I had to quit my job, went back to Lufkin, went to a naturopath who did a lot of research, and that's when we started doing the blood work and all, because she said, no, there's something going on that made your thyroid go bad, go get out of, what was that word she used? It made it get out of balance, I believe.
Okay.
So we started experimenting then. We came to Colorado for a couple of vacations, talking to people, bringing people up to show them medical cannabis doctors.
Mm-hmm.
And through, helping other people get up here, I learned a lot and started using the cannabis myself.
Now, in Colorado, do you have to be a resident of the state in order to get a medical license?
Yes, ma'am. You sure do. You sure do. I had to come up here and get my driver's license, and yeah, we've registered my Jeep here. We've got a 2-story house on an acre, plus a 2-acre farm out in the country there in East Texas that we just had to leave. It's taking the toxins from all the chemicals to be able to walk and talk just is not worth staying there. I have bad reactions. My health is worth more than,
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely. Well, what sort of medications were you on before you switched over to a more natural medicine?
I had taken Tylenol, went to the hydrocodone for just a little while because of the bad reactions. And I had tried Wellbutrin. Very bad reactions there. My heart palpitation.
Oh, wow.
Well, there was another one. Zoloft. Oh, Zoloft was so bad that it made me a total zombie. This was during a wartime, and my son-in-law and daughter were over, and my son-in-law, I forget where he was, but I know my daughter was in Iraq.
Yeah.
And there was an uprising, and the Zoloft had such control of me that I had no reaction whatsoever.
Oh, wow.
And my daughter's compound had just been bombed.
Goodness gracious.
And that's when I knew that I no longer needed to take Zoloft.
Yeah.
And started weaning myself off. Yes, ma'am.
So you mentioned that you were pretty debilitated before you moved up to Colorado. I mean, that's an amazing transformation from going to not able to physically walk and complete a grocery trip to hiking in the mountains where I'm sure the air is much thinner. That's crazy to me.
Much thinner. It is amazing. I love Texas. And if I could be in Texas and be healthy, I would be there. We have a home. We have land there. Here, we're living in an RV park in a motorhome. But being able to walk and help my husband and hike and be a functioning person, what's that worth?
Exactly.
What's it worth? For me, for us, it's a lot.
Yeah, it's certainly worth living in an RV for sure.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, it is. My medical expenses are much less than if I were going to a doctor, a normal physician like we have in Texas, instead of a medical cannabis doctor, because the cost of the medicine is less expensive. Now, is it too much for most people? Because of the way the laws here in Colorado have changed, you can't home grow and home cultivate and process your own medicine. And this is important for people, because once the corporations and the dispensaries they raise their prices, and the normal average working folks who have a chronic illness cannot afford the prices out of the dispensaries. That's why it is so very important for us in Texas when we start making these laws and changing them. We have to have home cultivation. We have to have home distillation. We have to be able to make our medicine at home. Who in their right mind can agree with taking a hydrocodone with all its side effects when you can take a plant that was given to us, make a little bit of medicine, and never have to take a hydrocodone again? Last summer, I had eye surgery. Both of my lids drooped down over my eyes so bad that I could hardly see. The eye doctor's been trying to get me to get that surgery done for several years. Last summer, we were fortunate enough to find an eye doctor who agreed to do it for a little bit less than a normal price. We traded out some work. And I've still got my prescription of hydrocodone sealed in the bag from the pharmacy because I used RSO and infused coconut after my surgery. I never had to take a pharmaceutical. I used natural medicine only.
Yeah. Hey guys, wanted to tell you real quick about our podcast host and sponsor, Anchor.fm. If you're thinking about starting your own podcast, I highly recommend Anchor. It's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. They'll distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go out to Anchor.fm to get started. That's Anchor.fm. Now back to the show. That's awesome.
Yes, ma'am.
How long after you moved did it take you to kind of find a recipe that would control your pain without having to use the RSO? Or did you automatically start with OSO, or did you kind of start with just whole flower and then move up to RSO? What was your progression?
Because of helping other people and knowing, I started with a small dose of RSO, very little, and I took it at night before I went to bed. A little bit more than a rice grain. I built it up to 1 gram a night, and I was on 1 gram a night for 90 days. I brought it down to 0.5 gram, and we've now brought it down from RSO to the maintenance dose of the infused coconut. Because what I think has happened is that there's a suspect, there's a train of thought that possibly some of these autoimmune disorders and fibromyalgia could possibly be brought on by endocannabinoid deficiency. It's my thought that because I saturated my body with the most strongest form of cannabis, that I helped correct part of the endocannabinoid deficiency. And that I'm able now to maintain it. Occasionally, when there is a storm come through, I will have to put a little bit of RSO in a peanut butter sandwich or something to help up the dose to, the nerve pain and all. The barometric pressure seems to cause quite a bit of pain.
Now, for those listeners who are not familiar, can you tell them what RSO is?
RSO started, it's the name of a gentleman's initials, Rick Simpson Oil. Many years ago, Rick Simpson created this oil, which is to where you extract the essential oil of cannabis using one thing you can use is Everclear. And this gentleman discovered that it would help cancer patients. Now, this was years ago. You can look up Rick Simpson on the internet. There is a show on YouTube, as a matter of fact, called Run from the Cure. And RSO is simply the most pure form of cannabis that you can get, the strongest essential oil that there is. And it has medicinal properties. Mike Wise, who is an advocate, cured his Crohn's disease. You can look him up on Facebook and on the internet, also YouTube. Him and Rick Simpson were overseas and started experimenting with the RSO, and Mike carried on and cured his Crohn's. So those men, Mike Wise and Rick Simpson, have helped thousands of people cure their cancers by helping them learn how to make the RSO. It's a simple process at home that anybody can do. And it's not near as expensive as chemicals like chemo. And it won't spread cancer either.
Right. Have you been back home since you've been in Colorado treating yourself with this natural medicine? Have you been able to come back since then?
No, ma'am, I can't come home. They'll throw me in jail if I bring my kind of medicine there. It's illegal, and it's not worth it to me. I like walking. I like being out of pain.
And I'm assuming you probably have friends and family here, and then you just, because your medicine is illegal, you can't even come back to visit those people.
No, ma'am, I've got a brother a cousin rather, who needs a transplant, a liver transplant right now. I'm the family caretaker. He's having to depend on his church. My daughter and her children are in Dallas, and there's several occasions that she needs me, and I'm not able to be there for her.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Because my mother lives in Missouri, and if we need her, she comes. I can't even imagine how she would feel if she wasn't able to, and I would imagine you feel the same way. I mean, it's
one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my life, is be away from my children and grandchildren.
Yeah. And I think lawmakers don't even take that into consideration, that people really are medical refugees, fugitives in one respect, and they can't even come back, because if they do, they run the risk of being thrown in jail and getting a felony record.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We took our business of 25 years. My husband's been a welding contractor, and we've had to start all over here in Colorado Springs.
Wow. Well, at least y'all are fortunate that he's got a skill that he can take to other places. He's not landlocked. And
we are.
Yeah.
We are so blessed.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I really hate that you can't come home. I really, honestly, I hadn't really thought much about that either.
Yeah, we're going to get the laws changed. I have faith.
I hope so.
Because everybody deserves to be able to heal.
Right.
Heal naturally if that's the way they choose. And folks need to pay attention, because it's not only cannabis. Check out what the FDA is doing right now. There's several herbs they are going after. So we the people need to stand up and pay attention to what these folks are trying to do. Big Pharma's got a push going on. Cannabis and herbs is scaring them. We need to stand up as people and say, you're not taking our natural herbs. Get out of our gardens, people. Get out of our gardens.
That's right. Get out of our bodies. Let us put in our bodies what we want to put in without the government trying to legislate that.
Well, Lord, even whoever you believe in, however creation came about, we as humans were given free will.
Mm-hmm.
So who are these people to make these laws that we can't put a plant to ingest it? Wow.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that. I don't get where politicians suddenly thought they had the authority granted to them to regulate a plant.
Isn't it crazy? Isn't it crazy? I think it started back in 35. I'm not sure. I don't remember. I'd have to pull out my notes.
Good old Harry Anslinger.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
He was a peach.
Yep. Yeah. You know, his great granddaughter is here in Denver.
Really?
Yes, ma'am. She works at a doctor's office. Her doctor's office. Let me see. Let me look at this. The doctor's office that she works at helps sponsor a program every few years called MJ for MD.
Really?
And the next one, yes. Yeah, I'll send you some information.
I would love to learn more about that because I've actually recorded an episode with CJ from the Dangerous History podcast about Harry Anslinger. So that is very interesting.
His great granddaughter, she's Mufasa Mack on Facebook.
Uh-huh.
And I'll send you a link. But she's made it her mission to try to undo some of the damage that her grandfather did.
Well, good for her.
And, you know, she talks about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're very interesting. If we could get folks from East Texas to get some of the knowledge, to gain some of the knowledge that is here in the cannabis communities, in the doctor's offices, they would be amazed. Totally amazed.
Yeah,
I've got a friend.
Go ahead.
Whose daughter, son rather, has the what's it called? Cerebral palsy.
Mm-hmm.
And the medicines that they had them on in Texas they were just what's the word? Totally debilitated because of the meds, and now they're thriving.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the whole family is. It's just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, if we could ever get them past the propaganda, and really, honestly, Elizabeth, I think the people of East Texas are ready. They're just afraid to talk about it because, like I said, I've gotten far less pushback than I thought I would get when I speak openly on Facebook about cannabis. And I really thought I would get more pushback on it. And our attendance last night at an event with the Texans for Responsible Marijuana Policy and Foundation for Informed Texas was pretty good for East Texas. It was a couple dozen people that were there.
Awesome.
Yeah. And
I was going to ask, how did that go?
Yeah, it went.
Did anybody from law enforcement show up?
Well, there are suspicions that at least one person there was from law enforcement, but nobody came with like their uniform on.
Doggone it. And you saw that I posted everywhere asking somebody to take the sheriff, the police chief.
Right.
Ask them to take them because they are the front line.
Mm-hmm.
They need to know. You know, if our district attorneys and our sheriffs and everyone, if someone in their family were to see the health benefits, they would change their mind.
Absolutely.
You know, I've got friends that have the very same cancer that I buried my favorite cousin with, my cousin Patricia. You know, I helped take care of her through her illness. And I now have friends here who are survivors of 5 and 10 years of the very same cancer. You know, that to me says there's something really wrong in America and our medical community when they allow greed to take over and be more important than human health, humanity. Come on, give me a break.
Yeah, it's just crazy. Just absolutely crazy.
Yes, ma'am.
And we just got to get through. You know, we've had 80 years of propaganda, so we've got 80 years worth of brainwashing to overcome.
Right. We've got how many years of research?
Mm-hmm.
You know, just a few years of research now, just a couple actually.
Right. Well, in the grand scheme of things, absolutely. They're doing a lot of great stuff over in Israel. But in the grand scheme of things, the amount of time that they've been researching this stuff is not really that long.
No, not at all. And you saw the reports to where the hemp seeds and what the nutritional value of the hemp seeds were.
I have not seen that, no.
Amazing. I will send you a link on it.
Okay, that sounds great.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
It is. It's amazing. Actual nutritional value.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, now that we can research it, we will find out more. There's no doubt in my mind within a couple of more years, there's going to be so much research that they're not going to have a choice. But
yeah, they were doing a congressional hearing earlier this week about doing more research, because I think right now the only college in the United States that can do it is like University of Mississippi or Mississippi State or something, some college in Mississippi, or and ironically it's still illegal in Mississippi.
Well, isn't that something?
Yep. I don't think they even have a medical program at this point. But anyway, yeah, it's just going to take some time to overcome all the propaganda from the government. And but honestly, some people we're never going to be able to convince them that they've been lied to by the government. Unfortunately,
there's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot. You've got some doctors who absolutely refuse, even though we have the science behind it. But if they find out, I've got a friend there who lives in Wales, who his doctor told him he would not see him anymore, and he's got liver trouble.
Oh, wow.
And he was in pain and, just kind of smoked a joint at night before he went to bed. And for some reason, because he was on disability, his doctor tested his blood. And when he found out he was on THC, or, had the THC in his system, would not treat him anymore until the THC was out of his system.
Wow.
The man like to have died.
Yeah, a month without treatment, because it takes, a month to 6 weeks for it to get out of your system?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, he should find a new doctor.
Well, I wish we could, but all of them are that way.
That's true.
So many of the doctors in Texas,
yeah,
people suffer tremendously because of the attitude in Texas. Pain and suffering because of attitude.
You're right. And I probably should have asked you this sooner, but I have family members who suffer from fibromyalgia, and I really don't know what it is. I mean, I know what it is. I know it causes aches and pains, but I was wondering if you could kind of describe. I know it was debilitating for you. I wonder if you could kind of describe maybe what the pain was like, or is it always there, or is it something that kind of comes and goes? What was your personal experience with it?
It comes and goes, and it's constant, if that makes sense. You've got a low level, or I had, and my little cousin, I have a cousin who also has it. And for myself, it was a constant low hum of pain in the neck and shoulders, in the hips, down the legs. Just a constant hum. A sound would make me jump out of my skin. It makes your sensory, it's just like on hyperactive motion. When a flare hit, it would shoot pain. And the best way I could describe it to my husband was there was pain shooting down my arm and out my fingers that felt like an electrocution. There was pain shooting down my legs, out my toes, and it felt like an electrical shock. There's no pain like it that I know of. Childbirth was not like that pain. The fatigue, to where there weren't many days, but occasionally the fatigue was so bad that to get up and take a bath was a chore, and it was all I could do for that day. That's no way to live. That is no way to live. I was a hard-working woman, worked 2 jobs several times in my life, helped my husband as a welder. I was his helper.
Well, you said you worked on a pipeline. You don't just sit around doing that kind of work.
Oh no, that was running around, running up and down those pipelines, taking parts, helping the welders a little bit, helping, Lord, let's see, my main job was on the equipment. I was called a swamper, and it was my job to take care of the equipment, keep it oiled, keep it greased, keep the operator out of trouble, because their sight is limited. So I was constantly running around, moving, running up and down that equipment, greasing it, whatever needed to be done to keep the operator and everyone around them safe. And so a hardworking woman, I enjoy my job. But once the fibro hit, there was no doing any of it. When a flare come on, you cannot do it. It's impossible. You try to take medicine, well, then you're a danger to anyone on the job site. So it's kind of a catch-22, to where if you can take a cannabis pill form, an RSO or whatever it takes at night, and then go to work the next morning, then it would make a big difference for a lot of people. A lot of people that are out of work could go to work if they could just medicate naturally. We buried, here's another one, a young gentleman who grew up in and out of my home. Opiates got him. He overdosed from heroin.
Wow.
I've got a young friend here with me right now, whose same scenario, had a back injury. Doctors took him off his pain meds. He went to heroin, went through it for a couple of years, learned about cannabis, using it for pain, using it to get off of the heroin. The young man is now no longer a heroin addict and has gone back to work, taking care of his family. He's a structured member of society now. We've got Veterans for Natural Rights, Brian Ortega. He was a veteran who Texas had him a zombie. He sold everything he had. He moved here to Colorado Springs, and he's now running Veterans for Natural Rights, working, going everywhere, because he's able to medicate naturally without the opioids. It's life-changing.
Yes, absolutely. If people just had access to this, then they wouldn't have to turn to a lot of the harder drugs. One of the tropes that's always trotted out by, I guess, prohibitionists is it's that marijuana is a gateway drug. And it's just completely preposterous. It's been disproven, but they still repeat it because that's one of the talking points.
I've got several folks I can send you to right now that can say that cannabis got them away from their opiates and away from their alcohol because they're able to settle down and relax. Some folks with anxiety, it would send them in a loop, but you have to learn which strain to use. Cannabis is just like pharmaceuticals in the fact of what works for one will not work for the other, but another kind will.
Yeah, it is kind of a process to figure out what works best for your body.
Yes, ma'am. So if you have access to caregivers, access to doctors, and access to medicine, then you have more control over your life, and you're able to medicate and to have a fuller life.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Elizabeth, I really appreciate your time coming on and chatting with us. It's been a great talk, and I wish you the best. I'm hopeful that we can get something shaken loose. At least maybe we can get something like a decrim where we would have a civil penalty as opposed to, jail time, so that people like you can come back to see family and not have to worry about being thrown in jail for, small amounts of cannabis.
Well, my dream is that we can get the federal prohibition totally annihilated, because I believe that we need to put cannabis back in our diet, and we would see a lot of these rare disorders disappear
No, I'm with
if
you
it were
100.
put back in our diet.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on that. I'm just, trying to think of what is possibly
Whatever.
possible at this point with who we have as our lieutenant governor. So,
True,
if
without a
we could
doubt.
just get decrim, that would be amazing.
That would be wonderful. Yes, it would. Yeah, yeah. Gutierrez, Representative Gutierrez in San Antonio, I believe he has a good program. If we could pay attention to what he's got to say, I believe his bill that he is proposing would help a lot of us.
I'll have to go check that out. I haven't seen it, but I'll definitely check that out. And I'll once I find it, I'll put a link into Date's show notes so that folks can go look at that as well.
All right. Well, I'll send you links tonight.
Okay, great.
And I sure appreciate you so much for all your hard work.
Yes, ma'am.
I know it's not easy to put up with both sides of the coin, and for you putting yourself out there, many of us appreciate you very much.
Well, it's really much better than I had thought it would be. I was very nervous about coming out publicly and supporting it whenever I first started, but the support that I've received has been overwhelmingly positive. So my hat's off to the people who have been fighting this since the 80s when it wasn't at all popular.
Yes, ma'am. I had a psychiatrist back in the early 80s tell me, young lady, and this was in Texas, he said, young lady, I cannot tell you this legally, but if I were you, I'd smoke a joint.
Wow.
And it was because of the chemicals, I forget what prescription they had tried on me for ADHD. And I couldn't take it. I was dealing with a lot of depression. And he finally told me, he said, "Hun, best thing you can do is go home and smoke a joint."
Well, good for him. He must have been old school.
He was very old school. He was the one that told me way back that when they used it as medicine, that doctors would put 10 strains together to help with cancer. Yeah.
Well, it was in the U.S. Pharmacopoeia from, I think, 1850 to 1942. So it was something. It was something that was used commonly, and they used it to treat the very things that we're wanting to use it to treat today. So we've lost 80 years of research on this plant because of politicians and bureaucrats. It's a real shame.
Ma'am.
Real shame.
It is. But it's going to turn around. I have no doubt.
Well, it's just a matter of convincing politicians that this is a winning issue. At the event last night, they had a poll where they had asked people, do you think the laws need to stay the same, or it still needs to be illegal? Do you think it needs to be, medicinal needs to be allowed? And basically on that poll, and then there were only 14% of people that they were polled that said that it needs to remain illegal. So 86% of the people responding to that poll recognized that something's got to change. Not all of them were proponents of, the government getting out of it, but they at least accepted that we need to have some sort of medical program so that people can get real access to cannabis.
That would be wonderful. It would make a big difference.
Yep. And we just need to get
else, if they would allow our children to have the cannabis to stop their seizures, and our veterans to have the cannabis to be able to help with their PTSD.
Right.
If they could just make sure that gets done, we could help so many people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for your time, and we are just going to keep on fighting the fight down here in Texas and hopefully get it to the point where you and your husband can come back and see your family.
Thank you so very much. I sure hope so. I miss my farm, and I miss the sun, and I miss my family. It's horrible, but I'm thankful that I'm healthy.
Yes, that is definitely something to be thankful for. But we're just going to keep fighting it down here, and maybe we can get something shaken loose so you can come back to Texas.
I sure hope so. I believe it with everything in me.
Right. Well, thank you so much again, Elizabeth.
Thank you, guys, and keep up the hard work.
Yes, ma'am, we'll do. All right, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Show notes for today's episode can be found out at cannabishealsme.com/91. Thanks once again to Elizabeth for joining us. We will be back here on Thursday with another educational episode. And to be quite honest with you, I've got a couple that I'm tinkering with playing, and I can't figure out which one I want to do. So it'll be a surprise for me when I finally decide, and it will be a surprise for you when you tune back in on Thursday to listen to the educational episode of the Cannabis Heals Me podcast. Thanks again, everyone. You guys have a great week, and we'll be back here on Thursday. Hit the subscribe button and you'll never miss an episode of the Cannabis Heals Me podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or whatever podcast app you're using. Do you have a suggestion for a guest on Cannabis Heals Me? Send an email to podcast@cannabishealsme.com. We'd love to hear from you. Please do not take any information from Cannabis Heals Me or its guests as medical advice. Contact your licensed physician before taking cannabis or using it for medical treatments.